Prime Minister, earlier on we talked about the US and North Korea. President Trump has long said, let me quote him, China is the linchpin to solving the North Korean crisis. How would you respond?
China has a major role to play. They share a border with North Korea. They have very high volume of trade with North Korea, or at least they are a very big part of North Korea's external trade, and so they have influence over North Korea. But I would not say that the North Koreans will do anything the Chinese want them to do. I mean, big countries know that small countries can be quite obstreperous.
But from your point of view, do you feel that China should play a bigger role in resolving the nuclear crisis in North Korea?
I think the Chinese have complex calculations to balance. They are living there with a neighbor. They do not want to destabilize the neighbor. At the same time, I think they can't be at all happy with the way things are going with the nuclear tests and with the missile tests. It must worry them a great deal.
Things were a little bit tense last year between Singapore and China over some comments made over the South China Sea. A few months later, you had to deal with the issue of Singapore's military vehicles getting impounded in Hong Kong.
Yes.
Now, last month, I know you just returned from a trip to Beijing where you met with President Xi Jinping and some top Chinese leaders. How would you describe relations with China now?
They are good. They are forward-looking. We are two countries and sovereign countries, so there will always be issues where we don't completely see eye to eye, but fundamentally there are no basic conflicts in our perspectives. And we both wish to do more together bilaterally and also in the context of ASEAN, because next year Singapore is chairman of ASEAN, and also for these couple of years Singapore is the ASEAN coordinator for relations with China. So we both want to make the relationship prosper. In fact, there's a lot we are doing together. Singapore has big investments in China. With the Belt and Road, I think there's opportunity for them to use Singapore as a base for financing, for regional headquarters, for all sorts of activities. And I see no reason why that shouldn't happen.
So just to be clear, relations between Singapore and China are not strained over differences in the South China Sea?
Every country will have every pair of countries will have some issues where I wish you agreed with me, and you wish I agreed with you. But we remain good friends, and it is so with Singapore and the US, it's so with Singapore and the People's Republic of China.
But these issues you've had to deal with China last year, any lessons learned for Singapore?
Well, I think we understand each other's position clearer now. I mean, Singapore's position is always...
It wasn't clear before?
It's clear, but events happen and then we react to events and then the positions have to be restated, clarified. And in the case of the South China Sea, our position has always been that we are not a claimant state, we have no claims, so we don't take sides on the claims, who owns which island. But we do have an interest in freedom of navigation, in the rule of international law, in the peaceful resolution of disputes, and in ASEAN having a role in an issue which is this important in our neighborhood. And I think that bears repeating.
Let's talk more about what you said about not taking sides, and let me quote you an article and get your reaction. The shifting geopolitical climate is making it more difficult for the Lion City to live with a giant eagle on one side and dragon on the other. Prime Minister, is Singapore in a conundrum?
Well, it's never easy to be a small country next to a big neighbor. If you have one big neighbor only, that's not easy to manage. If you have two big neighbors, well, in some ways that you have more friends, but in other ways you have to make more difficult choices.
But is it getting difficult
hope that the US,
manage that relationship between US and China?
It depends on how the US relationship with China develops. If that stays stable and good, then it's easier for Singapore. If that becomes strained or harsher, then it's harder for us.
What do you mean by harder? You have to pick a side?
No, if there are tensions between America and China, we will be asked to pick a side. It may not be directly, but you will get the message that we would like you to be with us, and are you with us? If not, does that mean you're against us? And
which side would you pick?
We hope not to have to pick sides. We have such substantial relations with both. And as our trade, China is our biggest trading partner. America is somewhere near there, and a very important partner in many other areas as well, including security. And we hope we will be able to maintain these relationships.
Well, Singapore, like you said, is going to be chair of ASEAN next year.
Yes.
There are some concerns China is and will lean on Singapore to keep ASEAN calm over the South China Sea. How would you respond?
As chairman, we are not the commander-in-chief. We are the honest broker. We are coordinating ASEAN. We are bringing the parties together in order to help to the degree that we can to produce an ASEAN consensus. Because ASEAN works by consensus. And unless all the countries go along and most of the countries agree, you cannot take an ASEAN position. And that is all the more so in the case of the difficult issue like the South China Sea, where the strategic interests of the different ASEAN countries are not entirely the same. Our position as Singapore is not the same as that of the claimant states, because we are not a claimant state. The position of a country which is like Laos, which is landlocked and has a border with China, cannot be the same as the position of the Philippines, which is an island nation, an archipelagic nation, and has a claim on the atolls and reefs. And if you look at Myanmar, it doesn't even have a shoreline on the South China Sea. It's on the Andaman Sea. So the interests do not all exactly fundamentally align, and therefore when you make a consensus, that consensus can only be to the degree that these countries do share a common perspective. And as the chairman of ASEAN, we will try and foster the process of coming to such a consensus.
Up next, Singapore's Prime Minister on political succession. That's when CNBC Conversation returns.
Hey there, thanks for checking out CNBC on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all of the day's biggest stories. You can also click on any of the videos around me to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.